So hopefully you can all hear me now. Apparently I didn't have my microphone turned on. So that was a really good start. So everybody is, hopefully you're going to get this come through in a second. And that is much better. Okay, technical problems have not been sorted apparently. So hi for everybody that didn't hear me just then. So I'm back for another episode of Watercolour Club. And I am coming to you live from my studio in my house. So I hope everybody's doing okay at home and dealing with everything as it comes. And hopefully you're all okay and ready to do some painting today. So apparently we have 37 people watching at the moment, which actually beats last week, I think. Not I say last week, last month. Time is not a thing at the moment. I don't know if anyone else is experiencing that. So let's see who's here. So we've got Ben. Hi Ben. He says afternoon miss break, which makes me feel like I'm back at school. Hi Yenna and Yenna's mum as well, ready to paint at home. And my mum as well, Rosalind's Creations, that is my mum. So hi mum, thank you for tuning in. Tom Rose, hi. Andrew is saying looking forward to this. Me too. I'm really excited, really nervous as well. But we'll get through it. And then I've got all of the comments about the sound, and hopefully everybody can hear me now, so that's brilliant. So hi Jack and Maggie as well, and hi Sarah as well. Okay, it's brilliant to see you all here, and thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first time coming along to Watercolour Club in the virtual realm, then welcome. This is for everybody. So I thought I would start by saying a little bit about me. For those of you who've never met me before or don't know who I am, my name's Eleanor Brake. I'm an artist and I live in Plymouth. What I do as an artist is not actually watercolour painting. So I tend to do more contemporary based work. So I do performance and installations, videos, stuff like that. But last year I got really into watercolour painting just as a hobby. I like to go bell ringing, and I was going to visit lots of beautiful churches, and I wanted some kind of memory of those places, so I started to paint again. And so through doing that and just sort of learning by doing, I picked up a few skills in this beautiful new hobby, which I started to want to actually bring to other people. So at the beginning of the year I started up Watercolour Club for people who don't paint. And we've been meeting at Ocean Studios in Plymouth, and we met for the first 3 months of the year. And then obviously we had to stop, and so I've moved the club online, which has actually been quite cool because it means that it can reach people across the whole of the UK as well as just in Plymouth. And I can actually do something a little bit more like tutorial based, whereas at the Watercolour Club it's kind of giving you the materials and off you go. So today I'll show you what I've got first, so that if you need to grab anything together, you can do that quickly before we start. Also, if you're just tuning in and you want to join in on the live chat and you can't see it, you need to make sure that you're logged into YouTube. And if you're watching on a iPad or a smartphone, just have to make sure that you're using the YouTube app, and then you should be able to see the comments. And then if you write me a comment in the live chat, I'll be keeping an eye on that when I can, and I'll reply and to any of your questions and things like that. So that'd be great. So what have I got today? So I've got some watercolour paper. Like last time, I've cut mine down quite small. I prefer to work on that size just because I can get more done, and I like them at the end. I think they're just really nice little maybe gifts for people or something like that, nice little sized pieces. But I've also cut a piece of larger paper as well. That's because I'm going to be showing you a couple of techniques to try on another piece of paper, and just having a little bit more room is a bit more useful. So it doesn't need to be a brand new piece. If you've got the back of an old painting that you didn't like, you could use that, but as long as it's just a piece of watercolour paper roughly that size, maybe bigger, that'd be fine. I'm using my watercolour set I used last time, which is my Daniel Smith watercolour paints. So I'm using these paints today. Some of you might be using tubes. So if you're using tubes, then you can just squeeze a little bit out onto the palette. So just make sure you've got a surface to work with. Then I have got my very trusty set of paintbrushes. So this is the Da Vinci set. It comes with 4 paintbrushes. I'll probably be using these 2. So a big one and a really small fine one like that. May or may not use this one. I did last time, but we'll see how it goes. But if you've just got one paintbrush, that's fine. We can work with that. Also very important is the jar of water. And if you were watching last time, you'll know that I had to disappear last time and refresh my water. So this time I've got 2. So as the water gets more dirty during the course of the painting, it is a good idea to refresh your water. The other thing I have is some masking tape, just to stick my work down. Now this is optional. I do it because I'm using a camera here which is going to be looking at my piece, and I don't want the water to curl my painting up away from the camera. It also leaves a really nice border around the edge. So if you'd like to use masking tape, I'll show you how to do that, but it is optional. You don't need to if you don't want to. Okay, so I'm going to try to get it so that you can see what I'm doing from the camera behind me. I had a bit of trouble setting this up to make it look straight at it. So let me know if you can't see what I'm doing at any point. So here we go. Something like that. So you've got a sneaky preview of what we're going to be doing today. So that's what we did last time. This time we're going to be doing a sunset scene, which is sort of over a lake with some kind of bank in the distance that you can see there. And then because the sun is so low in the sky, it's casting this shadow across that puts everything in the foreground into silhouette. So it's quite a nice, soothing image, I think, with lots of layers coming forward. You've also got these really bright areas where like the sun is shining and reflecting onto the sea or the lake, and the really, really dark areas here. And I've done mine with some reeds and a little bird. I've also put a little boat in, but this is kind of whatever you want it to be. So you could do a silhouette of anything along here, but I'll show you a few techniques to get some really nice paintbrush control so that when you're deciding what to put in the front here, you can get that looking really nice and sharp. So I do need to tell you that I worked through so many versions of this to try and make sure I could do it. So I tended to quite like this little bird, so I just kept putting him back in. Some of them I've put birds in the sky as well. I don't know if you can see that properly. So this painting has been developed through massive trial and error. So if it doesn't go right for you first time today, just take it from me that it didn't go right first time for me either. So that is fine. So the most important thing today is that we're having some fun. So I'm going to put this away, but I will refer back to it throughout the journey of this painting. Okay, so I need to get myself set up. And the first thing that I'm going to do is tape my piece of paper to the board. If I can find my masking tape, there we go. We have a few more people tuning in. So we've got Paul, greetings from sunny Somerset. We've got Matt Thomas. Hi, Matt. And Annette. And she's excited to see what we're going to paint. I hope that it was everything you were hoping for. And Margaret Osborne says her watercolour tubes have dried up, so she's using acrylics. Okay, that's fine. Whatever you've got at home is fine when you're painting, I think. I saw something online about making paint out of water, flour and food colouring. I've not tried it, but I don't know how it would be, but apparently it's really good and cheap. I can imagine it, if it got on your clothes though, I can imagine it being a little bit hard to get off. So when I'm putting my masking tape on, I'm leaving half on the paper and half just off the edge there like that. And then just before I start painting, I always run my finger along the edge there like that, because what we want to do is create a nice seal around the edge so that if you're painting and you can quite confidently go over that masking tape without worrying about it seeping underneath the edge of the tape there like that. Gives you a nice clean border when we lift it off. I'm going to zoom in a little. So if we refer back to one of my little paintings, so you can see in the middle we've got the sun and the reflection here of the sun, and those are bright white. When we're painting with watercolour, the traditional technique is that the white that you see in a watercolour is the white that is the paper. So a lot of watercolour sets come with a white paint, which can be quite confusing because people try to mix it into the paint to make a colour lighter. But actually all you need to do is add water. So a lot of traditional watercolour painters will never use white and will almost frown on people that use white. I don't feel like that. I think that there's a place for using white, and I tend to use it for final touches, things like that. But if I can, I leave the white of the paper coming through instead. So I'm going to show you how to get that effect without using masking fluid, because that's one way of doing it, where you paint on some masking fluid and then paint over the top. But I'll show you a little technique I found out just through trying it out, which makes it easier to leave that space white at the bottom. So I'm going to use a really small paintbrush, and I'm going to get quite wet. And I've not got any water on my paper at the moment, because the first thing I want to do is quite a controlled line. So when the paper is too wet, the paint sort of spreads out a little bit. So we don't want that today. So I'm going to use some yellow, and yellow is the lightest colour on my palette apart from this one, but it's also going to be in my final painting. So I'm using yellow, and I'm using quite a watered down version of it, and what I'm doing is spinning my brush in it, which just tidies up those bristles and makes sure it's a nice point on the end. And what I'm going to do, and hopefully you'll be able to see this, I'm going to draw a line across like that. I'm going to draw a circle for the sun, and I'm going to draw a triangle underneath the sun like that. Then I'm going to wash off my brush, and with a damp brush I'm just going to drag those edges out, but I'm not going to go inside the line. I'm going to leave that little streak white, just pull it across like that, and don't worry if it's rough, because we're going to be going back over that, and yellow is really easy to paint over, so that's why I'm doing it out of using yellow. I'm just pulling it to the side. Now you can see I've gone into the sun a little bit, or you might be able to see that, but don't worry about that, because what we can do is cover that up with some clouds or something later. So kind of just go with it. So Jane, hi Jane, who's painting along with her daughter in Dorset and granddaughter just outside Plymouth. So that's That's brilliant. I love how this is bringing loads of families together. It's great. Annette says, how often are you running these classes? At the moment, it is once a month. And when we're back to normal and I'm running it in Plymouth, it will be once a month again. So trying to keep it as normal as possible. Okay, so I'm just, with the wet paintbrush, I'm just blending out those hard edges so that when we come to paint over it, we can't see what we've done underneath. So you should end up with something a little bit like that. And what that will do is when you come to paint the sky, you can get quite close to the sun without worrying about painting over it accidentally, because that's very easy to do. When you're leaving spaces white, you can sort of imagine where they're going to be white, and then it really takes a split second to forget and to just paint over it, and then it's quite hard to undo that. So we're just leaving that there as a reminder that that bit's going to be white, that bit's going to be white, and then the rest we can work with later. Cool. So I'm happy with that. So I'm going to move on to, I said this last time, I said I wasn't going to use it, but a slightly bigger brush. I'm not going to go in with my really big brush because I do want to have a bit more control. Now what I'm going to do is load onto my palette a nice bright red. So if you've got a palette with this colour, this kind of scarlet type colour, I would go for that one rather than a crimson colour, because the crimson might not mix quite as well with the yellow to make the bright sort of sunset orange that we want today. So I'm adding a bit more yellow to my palette as well, just because I think I put too much red on. And then just going to combine those paints together to make a nice bright orange. Okay. And again, I haven't wet my paper. So last time, in the last tutorial that I did, we wet the paper first and let the sky sort of blend in together. But this time I've left it dry. And what we're going to do is use so it's quite a wet paint that I've got, and I've got quite a lot of water on my brush as well. But I'm going to do lines like this. It does leave some spaces, and that's fine, because if you look at my original here, the sky in the back is quite textured. I'm imagining that there are lots of clouds and there are layers and layers of these clouds. So as you go over, if there are white spaces, that's fine. We can go back over. So remember, when you get anywhere near the sun, just to slow down and make sure you're not quite going into it. Leave it nice and bright in the middle. Okay. And then to wet my brush again and pull some red in. So I'm just sort of making the orange even more red. And I'm going to go back over those bits that I didn't quite catch last time. Slowing down near the sun. Okay. And same again, I've run out of red. Pop the red, oops. Pop the red back on. And these sort of sideways lines are sort of representing the cloud formations, the long, those really beautiful long red clouds you get when the sun starts to set. So I'm going close to the sun, but I'm not going close enough to be able to interrupt that lovely white bit in the middle. Okay. Now the lake is going to reflect the colour of the sky. And so we start to mix the same colours again. But the other thing we need to remember is that the lake is coming towards us. So what will happen is that the further away the water is, the closer the ripples will be. And as they get bigger, or as they come towards us, they get bigger and they get spaced further apart. So the way to kind of mimic that is to just do lots of very, very small marks at the top, almost no space between them. But then as you come towards you, just sort of lift the brush off of and just start to paint with your wrist a little bit more. So it starts off very tight at the top. No space between those ripples, and then loosen it off. And that works quite well, because by the time you get to the bottom of the painting, usually your paintbrush is a little bit more dry than it was at the beginning. So you get those white bits as well. So how's everybody getting on? Is this working? Be nice to know how many people are painting along at home. I'm just going to do that again with exactly the same technique, just a little bit more paint. And you can do that as many times as you want with slightly different colours, and you'll get like a bit more depth in the water. But don't worry about it being absolutely perfect, because this is just the first layer at the moment, and we can always come back to it afterwards. I'm quite liking the colour of my water right now. It's like this beautiful orange. Okay, now the last bit before I let this layer dry is I'm going to mix a nice light colour, so lots more yellow, and I'm also going to add quite a bit of water just to weaken that colour down. And then I'm going to just brush it over any of those white bits that are showing. Just gently brushing it over the top. And that sort of smooths it out a little bit, because we're not looking at a really rough sea. We're trying to look at a nice calm lake. So the smoother the colours, I think, the nicer. Okay. Alright, so now we've got to the point where we have to let this layer dry. And really one of the most important parts of painting with watercolour is to have that patience to let a layer dry before you start working on it again. So because I've got quite a lot of fine detail that I want to do on my piece, I can't go into that too soon, because if I paint on that now, the black paint will just spread out into the sky, and it's a very common mistake. I do it all the time. I just get too excited and start to paint before the layers dry or the paper's dry, and it's really difficult to undo that. So if you're at home and you've got a hairdryer, you could dry it with a hairdryer. And that would speed things up for you. It's also a very, very nice day, so if you want to rest your painting onto a windowsill or onto a radiator, that would be a good idea to speed it up. But I'm just going to let mine dry naturally, because I know some of you at home might be waiting, so I'll use mine as the tester, and so when mine is dry, yours will probably be dry too. So while we're waiting for this, it's a very good time if anyone has any questions or anything anybody would like to say, then you could type that into the live chat, and we'll work our way through some of the comments. There's apparently 49 people watching at the moment, which is absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for tuning in. I know this event really went crazy on Facebook. Which was amazing to see. I was getting notifications all day. The first day I put it up, it was my phone wouldn't stop. So thank you very much for everybody that helped to spread the word and got the word out there, because it really, really did help. So in the meantime, I did say that I would be teaching you a little technique about paintbrush control on my bigger piece of paper. So if you'd like to get out a scrap piece of paper, it would be a good time to have a little practice. Turn it back into that view so you can see what I'm doing, and I might need to move the camera slightly as well. So I hope that's, yeah, right. So I'm using my smallest paintbrush, and in a moment when we start drawing the silhouettes and the bank in the distance, we're going to be working with a really dark colour. So today I'm using black, so I'm using this one over here. Usually I don't actually use black. I tend to use a very dark brown, but I think that using a black in front of a sunset scene really intensifies the colours. And I was doing a little bit of experimenting, and so you can see there that the black over the top of the red just makes the red look a lot brighter. So I'm going to go with a black today. And when you're doing lots of fine lines and detailed things, one of the most important things is that the paint needs to be quite wet so that it flows. And I'll show you a few things that can go wrong as well, so that you can sort of diagnose any problems. So if something's happening to you and you don't know why, you might be able to identify whether you need to add more water or less water or things like that. So I've added lots of water to my paintbrush, and I've been really mixing that into the paint, so it gets to the point where it really starts to flow. I'm also sort of twisting my paintbrush around, turning it around, and that just puts those bristles into the right place on my paintbrush, and it stops them from splaying out, which can be really annoying because you'll get like a double line. Really annoying when you get double lines. So when you've got the paint at that sort of consistency, the next thing to try is to just try doing some lines like this. And as I continue, the paintbrush will get drier and drier and drier, and you'll start to see what happens. And I start to get these spaces. So the first ones were really, really nice, but as I went along, I got more and more spaces. You can also see, and I was exaggerating it a little bit, but the line's gone quite wide, and that's because I was pushing down quite hard onto the paper, and that was accelerating the rate that the paintbrush was drying out because the paper was just pulling it out. So I get my black. I've got lots of water on my paintbrush, and I'm mixing it into the paint there, and mixing it down here. And you can play around with this as well to see what works best for you, because actually some people find slightly thicker paint easier to control, and some people prefer it a little bit thinner. I know the consistency that I like, so I aim for that, but that's all just come from just trying and getting it wrong lots and lots of times in a row. So I'm going to try again, and I'm going to, so hopefully you'll be able to see this because I'm trying to not get in the way of the camera, but you just very feather light. So I'm going to actually lift my wrist away from the paper, feather light brush strokes, and just see how thin you can get it. And the less pressure you put on the paintbrush, the finer those lines will be. You can see they're getting quite fine. I'm just really practicing pulling my hand away from the paper and drawing really, really thin lines. That was nice and fine. Proud of that one. There we go. And my paintbrush is just starting to dry out now, so you can just see some. So this is a good little warm-up exercise. If you know you're going to be painting something with a lot of detail in it, it's good to draw some, try and get it as thin as you possibly can. Okay. So trying it again, I'm going to draw another row of these lines, and you'll probably be able to guess what I am sort of trying to represent with these lines. So in a moment when we start painting, we're going to be needing to do these beautiful reeds along the front, and they're quite tricky to get right, so having a little practice before you go can make you feel a little bit more confident about putting it onto your background. So once you've done that for a little while, oh, those are really thick, pushing too hard. The other thing you can try is doing a line that starts off thick and gets thinner. So, and sometimes I find this easier to do long ways, like horizontally. So you start with a lot of pressure, and then you lift up. That didn't go so well, and lift up. So it wasn't going so well, so I'm going to add some water into my paint, because I think, so as you can see, it's a little bit dry on the edge, so I'm just adding more water in. And try it again. So lots of pressure, not a lot of pressure. There we go, like a little tadpole. So every time I'm going back to get my paint, I'm adding more water to the mixture, because just in that little time that it's been sat there, it's sort of, I find it sort of separates a little bit, or something happens to it, and it's not quite as nice as it was when I put it down. So always add water. So can you guess what these little lines are going to be? And once you've tried it that way, you could try it the other way as well. See which way you find easier. And it's quite relaxing to do this. Could spend all day doing it. Okay, I'm going to just tap my painting with the back of my hand. It's almost there. So the way to test your painting to make sure that it's dry is just tap with the back of your hand, and you should be able to feel if it's wet. It feels a little bit cold, so I think that it is just very slightly damp, but I expect it'll be ready to go in just a couple of minutes. So I'm just going to carry on doing my practice lines. Is anyone doing this along at home? And if so, is it getting easier? Or are you having any problems? So those ones I was quite pleased with. I was sort of moving my paintbrush with just the tips of my fingers like that and holding it back from the paper, and it was working quite nicely. So that's another way to try it. Let's try it down here. Okay. I always go quiet when I'm concentrating. Okay, so I think we're going to move back onto the painting. So I'm giving my paintbrush a really good wash off in my water. We're going to come back to the palette, if I can get it on the camera. And I'm going to add a bit more red onto my palette and mix it in with the yellow to make quite a dark reddy orange, like that. And because the rest of the painting has dried, these marks that we're about to do are going to look quite dark against the paint we've already put down. So I'm doing the same thing where I'm mixing the water into the paint and I'm turning the paintbrush around, exactly the same as when we were practicing with the black. Now these are going to be, if anyone guessed correctly from these lines here, these are going to be the ripples on the lake, and we're just going to make those a little bit more defined. And what it will also do is sort out this sort of triangle in the middle, which has got a big yellow outline to it. So because we've gotten used to that fine control, and if you feel like you haven't, you can go back and do a few extra goes on the paper before you come onto here, but you can go very close to that white line without actually interrupting it. And I'm just drawing some very, very light lines that just go right up to that white edge. Don't cover up the yellow, but they just break it up a little bit just to make it look a little bit less like it stands out. And then I'm going back to my palette again, and keep going back because your paintbrush will dry out, so keep wetting your brush, grabbing some more paint and then pulling those lines out. And remember that at the back, at the furthest distance away from us, the ripples are going to be really close together and almost hard to tell apart from each other. Doing it again, mixing it up, spinning my brush round. There we go. Just those tiny, tiny little lines, side to side. Or you could do short little lines in one direction and short lines in the other direction, whichever feels more natural to you as you go. And as we get closer to the viewer, or us standing on the bank of this beautiful lake, you can see that the ripples start to spread out a little bit. There we go. You end up with a beautiful texture in the lake, and it covers up any problems that might have happened in the first layer that you did. You can use these lines to go, actually I didn't do that bit very well, so I'll cover that bit up, and then nobody needs to know. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to wash off my brush completely, and I don't want it to be sopping wet, so I'm going to just drag it along the side of the water pot. And what I'm going to do is, just like we did with the yellow right in the beginning, I'm just going to soften the edges of that highlight where the sun is shining, just blending that in, and then it just starts to look a little bit more natural. There we go. And you can do that at any places where you think actually it needs to be a little bit more blurred together. You just use the water, a little bit of water on your brush to just blend out some colours. So Matt says he turned the studio over looking for some watercolours, which he didn't find, so using water-soluble pastels. Okay, that sounds really good. And Anne says she's just watching because she's only got acrylics. You could give it a try with acrylics. It should work. It's a slightly different feeling, I think, painting with acrylics, but you can definitely give it a go. And Anne says she's not painting along, but she's learning a lot. Thank you, Anne, for watching. And Yenna and her mum are having a lovely time, and practicing is going well. That's brilliant. I'm glad to hear it. So, I think this is starting to come together. So the next bit that we'll work on before coming into these lines, because we'll have an extra little section of practicing, just to make sure we're really ready. We're going to do these really nice clouds up in the sky, up here. And so there's a few different ways of doing clouds, and I find that a lot of people have different preferences. So sometimes people paint on quite a lot of paint and then dab it off with a paper towel, and that's really effective, and it can work really well. I find though that I get annoying little white bits of tissue stuck onto my painting sometimes, so I found a different way to do it. But however, if you feel like that would work for you, the technique is to scrumple the paper towel up, and then so it's just like a stamp, and then you get like a pattern in the sky, and it is quite effective. So you could try that, but the way I'm going to do it today, if I can get my palette on camera, I'm going to grab some yellow and pop it into my mixture down here. Going to have some quite orangey coloured clouds, and I'm making it quite thick, just spinning the brush around in it. And I'm using a larger brush as well, I forgot to say that, so I've put my little brush down, giving that a rest for a second, but I'm using a slightly bigger brush. Once you've got lots of paint on your paintbrush, what I do is I put my brush on its side and I sort of stamp it across. It's not showing up very well because the colour I chose was very light compared to the sky. That's okay, we'll go back over and fix it. So I'm just stamping it across. Yeah, I definitely need to go for a darker colour, so let's add some more red in. Let's almost go for red clouds. Let's try that. So I'm going to stamp it across. That's better, you can see them now. And I've just gone over the sun a little bit. You don't need to do that, but my sun wasn't quite round, so I've decided to cover that bit up. Okay, and you could do ones higher up. It's just stamping and just moving the brush up and down. Just go with your imagination, just let it decide where these clouds need to be. And you'll find that it's pretty spot on really, because clouds are just however they want to be. And somehow we seem to know how they look. There we go. And because mine's at an angle, I've got these drips coming, so I'm just going to, got a slightly damp paintbrush, just going to drag those away. Stop them getting on my sea. Okay. Yeah. So I'm quite pleased with that. You can sort of go back through and sharpen up any of the edges of the clouds that you think you want to be more defined. You could add a bit more paint. You could also, if it's too sharp, particularly towards the bottom of the cloud, you could soften that out with a bit of wet, just a wet paintbrush, just soften out the bottoms, and that can help. There we go. So I think it's not quite as defined as this one, because I started with a much darker sky. So if yours is looking red like that, that might be what's happened. Whereas with this one, obviously the paint, because it was light on the background, you could really see the difference in the clouds. So that's what's happened to this one and why it looks so different. But I think it's different in a good way. So hi Kate. Kate says that she's managed to find her daughter's watercolour set and Fee's really enjoying painting along. That's brilliant. That's good. Okay, so we'll go back to our practicing. You see why I needed a bigger piece of paper to practice my lines. So I'm going back to my black paint, which is here, and mixing it in and adding lots of water. I'm going to start off by doing some of those fine lines again, the up and down, the vertical lines, just by flicking my fingers. Doesn't matter if you go over the ones you've already done, this is just here for practice. And you can't see what I'm doing actually. It's better. Just with the tip of your paintbrush. And then let's try some horizontal ones as well. So I'm adding lots more water in, mixing it in. Just keeping as far back away from the paper as I can and adding as little pressure as possible. It's quite difficult. And it does take a little bit of practice. Okay. Sarah says her clouds all blurred into one. I think that's similar to what happened here. And also it might be that your painting didn't dry quite as quickly as mine did. So that could be an issue. Do need to make sure before we start working on the clouds. And I probably should have said that the painting needs to be perfectly dry. But otherwise it just sort of blends back out, which is really annoying. But hopefully you can make it work, because also you could wait for that layer to dry and then add the clouds in again over the top. You do several layers of clouds. It's a way to fix it. Okay, there are lots and lots of lines. So the other thing that we'll need to know how to do is some of the shapes in the foreground. So that little bird, which I really liked, I worked out how to break him down into shapes so that he was a little bit easier to draw and kind of get right every time. So if you want, you could practice drawing some little birds if you want to put a little lakeside animal in your picture as well. So I am doing exactly the same thing, getting that paint to the point which I like to work with it, and you should have started to get a feeling for what that looks like for you when you're doing those lines. So it's exactly that kind of paint that we want, and I will show you how to do a bird. So I'm going to zoom in, no, not out, in. Where can I paint him? Right, so I do a little dot, which is his head. Can you see that? Yeah. And a little dot, or a slightly bigger dot, just down and to the right or to the left, depending which way you want your bird to be facing. So these are the two dots. And then you need to link those up with a neck, like that. So it starts on that edge of that circle, down to that edge of that circle. So you get like a sweepy little neck. Then you do a tiny, tiny little beak, and that's hardly any pressure. And then tiny, tiny, these are the vertical lines for the legs. 1, 2, quite a tall bird, this one. And then for his tail, you can either do it in one sweep like that, you can leave it like that, or if you want him to have a bit more of a sort of fan tail, you could do a couple and join them up. There you go. There's a little lakeside bird. So you might want to practice him a few times. You might want to practice him a little bit bigger. So let's try a big bird. Oops. So it's a bit of a fat one as well. And start from that side of that circle down to there. This is looking a little bit like an ostrich. Little beak. Some legs. And a tail. And luckily, because he's completely in silhouette, we only need to worry about his outline. We don't need to worry about his individual feathers or anything like that. So it's quite nice to see that you can break down really simple, you can break something quite complicated down into quite simple shapes. And you could have anything you wanted along that foreground. You could have people, you could have trees. Perhaps if you've got any ideas for foreground things, maybe you could put them in the comments and give some people some ideas. But basically anything goes. Anything could be on the lake side, watching out towards the sunset. And it'd be cool to see loads of different interpretations on what that could be. So I just really like this little bird, and I've gotten quite fond of painting him. So little dot, big dot, join them together. Oops, that was a bit scrawny, so I went in again for a second one. And then little beak, leg, really tall bird. And the more times that you practice on a piece of paper that doesn't matter so much, the better it will be when you come onto your actual one, because it's really easy to tighten up again and really panic because you spent a while on your background and you don't want to ruin it, and you're going straight in with black paint, so it feels a bit scary. But if you've done it a few times on a piece of paper and you know that you can do it, it just makes it a little bit easier. So how are we doing? Yeah, I think we're almost there. Trying to judge it by also what stages yours might be at home. So if anyone can give me a clue as to how dry their painting is, that would be really great. And then I'll know whether I can move on. Seems to be quite warm in my studio at the moment, so my painting's drying a lot faster than normal, which is good for me. This one's gone a bit funny, but that's okay. Not so sure about that one, but that's why we practice. So that's okay. You could experiment with how small you can make them, how big you can make them. The other one to have a go at is the little birds that might be flying in the sky, if you'd like to do some of those. And those are quite straightforward, but again, it takes a bit of practice getting the really light pressure on the brush to do a really fine line. It's a little V in the sky to do it, so little V. Just a down, up. That. And those, you might even find, sometimes I see people do them the other way, because obviously when birds fly they flap their wings all the way down and then all the way up, so you get some that are down like that, and sometimes that can look quite nice if you've got a few birds flying away like that. So that's a few things that you could practice if your painting is still not quite dry enough to be confident about putting that black line on yet. And the other one, so in, was it this one? Yeah. And this one I did a little boat in the background there. So you could try that as well. And if you'd like to do a boat, what you do is a line across and a line up, which is a lot thinner. Then you can fill in like a triangle for a sail. And just fill it all in black because it'll be in shadow. And then to make it look like it's sitting in your scene, you can just draw a few black lines underneath it, which represents the shadow or the reflection of the boat in the water. So that's how to do that. You might decide that you want a little boy or something that it could be nearby. So it's totally up to you what you decide to put in your scene. And actually you can change this up with completely different compositions where you could put your sun and your reflection to the side. You could do all sorts of different things with this. So this is kind of just one of an infinite amount of ways of doing this, and you can try it through a few times. So Sarah says her clouds look a bit better now they're drying. Cool, that's good. I think that tends to happen with watercolour. It lightens as it dries. So sometimes when you put them on, it doesn't look quite right. And then as it dries and dries away and dries back, it looks a little bit softer. And so that's possibly what happened for you there, Sarah. Okay, so I'm going to go along to doing the bank, which is at the back of our painting. And now I'll put it there and I should be able to show you with this. So you can see that I've not just done a straight line. I've drawn a bank with what looks like lots of little things on the horizon. So this is where you can be quite creative and you can tell a little story to yourself, and really you know the story of your little place and you can tell it to other people if you want to. But I just find it quite nice when I'm painting something from my head, just to kind of decide what things are. And from this distance, you probably would never know. So I'd drawn a few what I'm calling trees, but I guess they could be anything. And I've put a little house there, but that could be a hedgerow for somebody else. So it's kind of it's a story in your head, but it doesn't really matter what it is. So what I'm doing, I'm going to get the paint to that lovely consistency that we had when we were practicing. So lots of paint, lots of water, turning my brush, and this is going to be the first attempt at getting some dark colour onto our background. So if you feel a bit tense and you're worried about ruining it, just take a deep breath before you go and really relax and make sure your shoulders aren't really tight, because that will just make things go a little bit wrong. And if you feel like you really can't do it yet, draw a few practice lines on your scrap piece of paper before moving across. So it's absolutely fine. You can take your time with it, but you know that you can do it. And also we're starting with the bit that's the furthest away. So if there's any mistakes, then it's fine, because they could be anything. So I'm just going to draw a line straight across, but it doesn't matter if it's bumpy. And I'm drawing it just over the top of where that original yellow line was that we drew. And then I'm going to go along the bottom of it as well and just fill it in. And you can see how wiggly that line is. And that was completely intentional, because I don't know of any lines in nature that are completely straight. So there you go. I'm quite pleased with it. I think that we could work from that. So then what you can do is load up your brush with a little bit more paint and make a few decisions about what you want in your painting. So for example, I'm going to draw a few trees. I'm going to start them on this side. I'm just going to, so to draw a tree when they're that far away, is to just draw little bumps. And maybe you want a really tall tree, so you could draw a tall tree that towers over all of those other ones. And then maybe there's nothing for a little while, maybe there's a little gap, maybe there's a little road that goes up towards there and goes into a forest, there's a little gap there. Then maybe there's a telegraph pole, let's say, and that would be a nice fine line, so straight line down. And that's a little telegraph pole. And I'm going to go along a little bit, and I think I'll put a couple more trees here. So you can really just decide as you go. So I'm going deciding some trees. So it's like there's a forest over here and a smaller forest over there. I really like that little fleck, that little highlight there. So I'm going to leave that. I'm going to let that shine through. Now I'm going to imagine that somebody lives over there, and they live right on the bank of that lake over there. So they've got a really nice house on the side. So a house is a little bit more straighter than a forest, and it might have a little pitched roof like that. See, anyone looking at your painting will probably not be able to tell you that that's what it is, but that's fine because you know what it is. You can decide the name of the man who lives in that house if you want as well. That's also fine. So I'm going to do some trees or some like small bushes that are actually in his garden, like that. I'll do on either side. You see where I'm going with this. I'm just making a nice little story, and it just means that when you look back at this painting, you can look at that bank and know that you thought about it and you made some decisions. There we go. I'm drawing some trees now. That's what these are. And maybe like what are they called? Like a telegraph, like a pylon. That's the word. So like a little thing like that. Yeah. And everything is so tiny because it's all the way over there. You can't see it. There you go. That's my lake, and that's my bank on the far side. And I might forget what all of that was by tomorrow, but that's okay. So now I'm going to move on to a slightly bigger paintbrush. And the reason for that is I want to block in some of the foreground quite quickly. So I'm getting my paintbrush wet. Keep forgetting lift up my palette. There we go. Getting some black, popping it on there. Now when you're deciding on the foreground, so I'll just pop mine back down for reference. I usually do this very quickly because if I overthink it, then that's when things go wrong for me. So I'm just going to do a riverbank, and I want it to be like like this sort of shape, like a V, so that it frames the picture a little bit. So I'm just going to draw a line like that and a line like that. And I didn't think very hard about that. I just went for it. And then you can come back in with your black on your brush and just fill it back in. And then smooth off that corner just so it's not quite so harsh. And that is our bank. And that is ready to go. So I do recommend doing that very quickly so that you don't end up with a line that is, you think you thought too hard about it and you put it in the wrong place, or it's gone slightly wrong. Just go with the first instinct and try that, and usually it's pretty spot on. So I went quiet because I was reading all the comments then. So we have Kitty, I believe that's Kitty, saying that she is a bit behind and the internet is being a bit funny, but she's enjoying it a lot so far. That's really good. And Andrew is enjoying the stories for the things in the distance. That's good. I'm glad you are. That's one of my favourite bits about doing stuff like this as well. And Ben says it's nice to listen while doing some work himself. That's good. Brilliant. Okay. So if you're at the point where I'm at, you might be ready to start drawing those reeds in. So let's have a look. Some black and some water, and I'm making the paint nice and flowy. And what I'm going to do is a few practice reads over here, just to make sure I've still got it. And I feel like I do. And then, again, nice and relaxed. Make sure that you're not tensing up because you're about to go onto your main painting. Nice and relaxed, and then draw some little reeds like that. And then they start to go better than you hoped. That's what I'm hoping anyway. And you could see I did it very quickly because, again, I didn't want to think too hard about where I was putting them, because that's when you make mistakes, or you draw them really, really parallel to each other, or something, which reeds never grow like that. They're all at wild and different angles. I'm going to add a few more in this way, just to... Okay. I've left this little bit blank because I want my bird to have somewhere to stand. But what I might do is add a few shorter ones in near there, like that. And time for my little bird. So again, you can practice him before you go for it, but I feel like I've done him enough times now. So I'm going to draw his head and his body and his neck, his little beak, little legs, which I've drawn a bit thick, but that's okay, and a little tail. And that is my bird on the riverbank. And I think I'd like to do a boat as well. And I'm going to imagine that the boat belongs to the man that lives in that house by the lake, and he has this boat as well. And he's just been out enjoying the sunset. So drawing my straight line across, straight line up, and then a little triangle for the sail. And then just to make it feel as though it sits in your scene, draw a few little lines going down like that. Okay. And then I think I'm also going to add a few little birds flying towards the sun as well, so they live up here in the sky. So I'm just going to draw a few little V's like that. I also feel like my little bird on the bank needs to be a bit fatter in his body, so I'm just going to go back in and see if I can make him a bit fatter. That's better. There we go. I feel a bit more happy with that. And that's my piece. So I'm going to leave that to dry before I try to take off the masking tape. Let's go back to here. Okay. So let me know how you got on with that. It would be great to see pictures and things like that. You can send them. I have set up, since last time, I've set up a Facebook page. So a lot of you might have found that already. But if you haven't, if you head over to Facebook and you go onto this event, it's hosted by Watercolour Club for people who don't paint, which is a new Facebook page. And what you can do is upload your pictures onto that page, and then everybody can see them. So make sure if you're putting them up, you don't mind that everyone can see them. It'd be great to see pictures of what you've managed to do. But also pictures of you painting along, that would be great. And yeah, and then what we can do is comment on each other's paintings and kind of congratulate each other for doing a good job. So that's what I'm hoping will come of this. So last time when we did the forests, I had emails coming in of people's work for weeks afterwards. Like people were rewatching, and people were doing it again and sending me their pictures, and it was just amazing. It just really brightened my day every time I got an email like that. It was just nice to know that it was actually helpful for people, because I know that it's a really tough time at the moment, and having something like this to work on, and to just take your mind off things for a little while is really good. So I'm glad that it's having that effect for people. So I certainly have been struggling a little bit with this whole situation. So actually painting has become really quite a therapeutic thing. Mum says, can you show the work again? Yes. Oh, it's stuck to my board, so I can't pick it up. So here you go. If you wanted to see it again, I'll leave it up on the screen. So if anybody wants to let me know how you're getting on, remember if you're watching on YouTube, then you can sign in and you can access the live chat over in that direction, and you can send me a message and I'll be able to see that. So let me know how you're doing, whether you need any more tips from me, and yeah, let me know what you decided to do for your silhouettes. Did you do anything different to me? That's what I'm interested to know. So I'm always very tempted whenever I do a painting like this. I'm always tempted to take the masking tape off way too soon. So I was tempted to do it then, and I had to remind myself that this black bit down here is very wet. So if I took it off now, what would possibly happen is this paper around the edge of that black bit there is very likely to tear. So if you've taped your piece down, keep it taped down until you can be confident that it is dry. One thing you can do, even if your painting is dry, is just blast it with a hairdryer and warm up the tape, and it actually melts the adhesive a little bit, and it makes it a little bit easier to lift up. And then when you do go for it, and I'm just going to show you, but I'm not going to take it off all the way, is you just pull it at an angle like that, and it leaves a really nice sharp edge. So you can see it works up there because it's nice and dry, but if I pulled it down to here, that would go wrong. So I'm going to pop that back up, but I will take it off before the end of the video because I'm sure it'll be dry in probably about 5 minutes. I reckon that'll be dry enough for me to do that. Okay. So what I'm thinking is that I'm going to do another one. So that we can, and I'll go a little bit quicker this time, apart from the bits where I have to wait for it to dry. But just so that if your first one didn't go quite to plan, you can have another go. And you can see all the steps that are involved. We still have a little bit of time. I'm also going to try this time, I'm going to make sure that the sky is a lot lighter than it was last time, so that we can get some nice contrast when we go to put the clouds on. So starting off with my tape like that, and then I'm going to run my fingers around the edge. So I didn't say this at the beginning actually, and I was meaning to. I've decided to do this painting in what we call the portrait orientation. So normally when you do a landscape or a scene like this, you would have it round this way, which is landscape. But I've decided to go portrait, and the reason for that is that when I was testing this painting out and trying it in different ways, I thought that the focus of this painting seemed to be in the sky and the lake, and it's kind of, those were the bits that I needed to see the most of, and I felt like stretching it out sort of took away some of the drama of the sky and the lake. So when I make a decision about, do I want to do a painting that is portrait or landscape, those are the things that go through my head. So the thoughts about what do I want to see most of. So for example, if I was doing if in the background here I'd been doing a really dramatic mountain range that was really varied, perhaps I'd want to do that really long, so I'd do that landscape. But I was more interested in this really long, the light and then the reflection that pulled the viewer's eye downwards towards this little V shape in the front where there's something going on in the foreground. So that's why I've made that decision. And I always think that it's good to be aware of things like the rules and like the idea that traditionally you should do a landscape, you should do a picture of like the natural world, that should always be landscape, and if it's a person it should always be portrait. It's good to be aware of those rules, but it's also good to sometimes break those rules. So there we go. So that's if you are not sure why I've decided to do it that way. The other thing I just let you know is that I've changed over to my clear, brand new piece pot of water, because my other one turned into a very sludgy colour like this, which is not so nice. So Jane says she's really pleased with the result for a beginner. That's brilliant. Really glad to hear that, Jane. And Sarah says, thank you, this has been brilliant. Thank you, Sarah, for coming. And Isabel is saying, what is the Facebook page? So I think what I can do is send a link into the comments so that you can click on it. And that makes more sense to be trying to describe where it is. So let me just find that for you. Bearing in mind my internet is very slow at the moment because of the streaming. That is the page. So what I should be able to do is copy that link. There we go. And there you go. So if you click on that link, you'll be able to find the Facebook page. And if you click make a post, I think that's what it says, then you can attach a picture onto that, and you can let me know how you got on. You can also, on that page as well, you can leave a review. And that's really helpful for me if you do leave a review, because then I get to know how you found it. And also if other people are wondering whether this is going to be something that they'd like to join in with, then they could read the reviews and see what people thought. So if you have really enjoyed it, then please do let me know. That would be brilliant and make me very happy. So, going to take you through it again, a little bit quicker this time, but still some attention to detail so that you can follow along. So the first thing I'm going to do is get some yellow, and we're going to mark out those areas that we're going to leave white. So I've got my bright yellow on the palette and I've just put it in the middle there, and I'm going to water it down so it's like a more of a lemony kind of yellow, a little lighter, and it doesn't overpower our painting. So I'm going to, can you see? Yes, you can. I'm going to draw a line across to represent the horizon, and I'm going to draw a circle in the sky, quite low, quite close to that horizon. There we go. And then I'm going to draw a triangle underneath that, just a little triangle to represent where the sun will be reflecting onto our lake. So I'm going to wash off my brush, and I think that's good. And then I'm going to drag that yellow line away from the white. So just to soften that edge, That's all we're doing here. Just softening it out, pulling it away, but not entering the little white area that we're going to leave white. Same thing for the sun. So just dragging that paint out of the way, softening it up. It just gives us a little bit more space when we're doing the sky and we get to the point where we're almost at the sun. We can leave a gap because we know that there is some colour there. So if you don't go all the way to the sun, it's fine. Okay. Okay, then I'm going to go for my slightly bigger brush, and this time, because last time I made my sky way too dark to begin with, I'm going to add some yellow to this colour. I'm going to make a nice light orange colour. I'm also going to add some water to it, which will just lighten it even more, make it into that weaker colour. I might add a bit of yellow actually just to brighten it. There we go. Okay, you can't see what I'm doing. I have to hold it up higher. There we go. I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to start doing these horizontal lines on the way down, like that. Now coming close to the sun, but remember not to actually touch that white bit. And it doesn't matter if it's a little bit streaky. So I'm coming back in, adding a little bit more yellow, a little bit of red. I'm going to do the same thing again, just to sweep that orange over the top. And it does look like I've managed to make that sky quite a lot lighter this time. So that should be good when I go to put the clouds on. And so now we're going to do the same at the bottom for the lake. I'm using the same colours, the sky reflecting in, so I'm just going to, and again remember that in the background, the furthest distance, those ripples are going to be very close together, and then as they come towards you they spread out, so you can just do some really sweepy gestures. Okay, I can come back in, slightly different colour, and you can fill in those gaps. So again, just pull them across. And then to those orangey areas. I'm going to put some really orangey coloured ripples in as well. I just really like the bright red look. There we go. So I'm at that bit that I don't like, which is having to leave it to dry. So I shall pause for a moment while we let that just dry off. So you can see that compared to this one, it is a lot lighter. So when we go to put the clouds on, I think we'll see a bit more of a contrast, and you'll see what I mean when I'm like stamping the clouds across. I'm also about to do the thing. I was about to do it without announcing it then, which would have been sad. So I'm going to take the masking tape off of this painting, which should leave us with a really nice sharp edge and hopefully no tears. So I'm going to get a corner up, and obviously this is the corner that I had to pull out earlier, so it's a little bit loose already. And when I pull it, I always pull at a right angle, so you can see that I'm pulling away from the actual painting, and that makes it much less likely for the paper to tear. There we go, nice and sharp. You can pop that away. Start over here. Now what I'm going to do is pop my thumb just on the corner there, and that just gives the paper a little bit more resistance. Maybe actually closer to the tape might be better. And then pull at a right angle across the bottom. Okay, now that one's under that, so I'm going to use it like a lever, gather it up, pull it away. There we go. See, it's worked quite well actually. So holding it down with my thumb, pulling away, and I've got it. And the last thing before I consider a painting to be done is it has to be signed. So I always sign mine with a pen. This is a fine liner pen. It's called Unipin is the brand, but any like inky pen or even a biro would work. You can sign in paint. There's no reason why not. I just prefer to do it with a pen. Now I would usually sign my paintings in the bottom right hand corner, and like within the border, so I wouldn't actually do it on the white of the border. But today, I think because that's too dark, I'm going to just do it underneath. So here we go. Time to be proud and write your name. And as somebody mentioned last time, it might be a nice idea as well to date these paintings, just because we're going through quite a historic time at the moment. So it's the 19th, 04/2020. And you have no idea how much your painting might be worth in the future. So I would sign it and I would date it as well, just to prove what you got up to when the world stopped for a few months. And yeah, be proud. So Ben suggests that pigment liners are another good set of pens to use, and Stedler is a good brand. That's some good recommendations. See, I just, this is one that was in my local art shop, and I tried out a few and I just really liked, because they did this in a few different sizes. So I've got a really fine one as well, which is really nice. But yeah, there's plenty of different kinds of fine liners that you can use. Some of them work, so if you add water over the top, it bleeds out, and some of them don't. Some of them are a bit more permanent, so you can have a play, because I find I put a lot of fine liner. Sometimes I put them over the top of my paintings to add extra details in and things like that. And then if I use one that's a bit soluble, I know that I can't then go back in with some watercolour paint over the top, because the ink will smudge. So it's good to know the limitations of any pen that you use. When it comes to signing your work, just go for it with whatever you've got, and feel free to experiment, and maybe part of your signature is what you do it with. So maybe you do it in a particular colour pencil or something like that. So yeah, whatever goes for you. And Kate says the second attempt is going much smoother than the first. That's good. That's how it should be, I think. It definitely happened to me as well when I was practicing this. I was getting quite anxious that it wasn't going very well. Right, so where are we at? So I'm going to go for the clouds, I think. So remember to just check that your painting is dry before you go for this. And if it is, then you're good to go. So mixing up a colour for my clouds. So I'm going to put some more red on. So I think the red sky is really, really nice, especially against the black when we put that on. So I'm going to mix that through. And if you remember, like last time, we're going to stamp the paintbrush across the top of the sky. So I'm going to start this time, because last time I started quite low down. So this time what I'm going to do is start higher up from this side. I'm just going to stamp it across. There we go, you can see these better. And just what I'm doing is tapping the paintbrush against the paper and going up and down and up and down. Just doing a line of clouds like that. Then what you can do is wash off your brush and tap off any of the excess water. And I just sort of smoothed it out with my fingers then as well. And just go along the bottom there and sweep up any of the droplets of paint that are forming. So that's my first layer of clouds, and I'm quite pleased with that. But I would like them to be a bit more red. So I'm going to add some more red into my mixture. Get the paint onto my brush, sweeping it around. And here we go again. So I'm starting lower down, halfway down the sky, and tap, 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 all the way across. And careful when you get towards your sun, because you don't want to completely cover it up. You might want to touch the sun and just make some of the clouds go over it, but you don't want to completely undo your hard work of leaving that little white bit completely white. And then I'm just going to come in and pull away those droplets. It's kind of blended out a little bit, but that's okay. And again, I think I'm going to go even more red. I'm going to be quite brave now. It's almost bright red. And I'm going to stamp it across. I'm going to sweep this one just underneath the sun, I think, and then go back up again like that. Going to, so you can just see I've moved my water pot in view, so every time I wet my brush like that, I also drag it across the top like that. So if you're finding that you're getting too much water on your painting, then that's a good trick to know. And then also just taking the excess off with my hands. If you use the paper towel, that's probably a lot cleaner. I just have this bad habit of using my fingers instead. Just taking away some of that bottom bit. And if you want to, when that layer has dried, you can sharpen up the edges of those clouds if you want to, and then soften off the bottom. So with clouds, usually, especially at a sunset, the tops of them are very well defined, and then the bottom of the cloud is a little bit more floaty, because it is just water vapour, so it doesn't have a hard edge. But because of where the sun is, the tops of these clouds will look quite hard. Okay. So the next bit, if we remember, I'm going to put it back on my easel just so that we're not tempted to just go for it without warming up. It's good to practice before you go for it, but I'm going to do some ripples in the water, which is those little red or orangey lines, and they're very fine, and they just sort out this little bit here and just make that look a little bit more like it's part of the lake rather than this strange floating triangle on the surface of the water. So I've loaded up my brush with the wet paint. Just do a couple of goes on here, just make sure that I can draw a nice horizontal line nice and smoothly, and then I go for it. So I just draw them across, and remember that those ripples are very close together. Further away they are, they're very close. And getting some more paint, more water as well, and pop it on. Just going quite close into that, towards that white area. Now I'm going the other way. So nice and smooth, nice flowy lines. To interrupt that white bit there. I'm quite excited to see everybody's paintings. Like it was incredible last time because obviously when I'm sat here and I'm sort of, it's weird because I'm just talking, I can just hear my own voice and it feels like I'm just talking to just out, and I'm just hearing my own voice all the time. It's weird. But then afterwards, to see all of the paintings coming in and to realise that actually there were so many people painting along at home it's just an incredible feeling. And you all did so well as well. It like the paintings that came in were absolutely incredible. And what was great is like seeing like entire families painting together and like all of their paintings photographed together, and that was really cool. So thank you everybody. If you did send in a painting last time, that really was hugely appreciated. And if you want to send me a photo of your sunset lakes, that would be also really massively appreciated. I'd love that. So I can't wait to see them. And so yeah, do post them onto the Facebook page. The other thing you can do is you can email them to me. And in a second, when I've finished my ripples, I will post my email address in the comments as well, so that you can send me an email and let me know how you got on. So there we go. So if you remember last time, what I did is I washed off my brush, cleaned it off, and softened off the edges of these lines up here, just to blend in the transition between this ripply bit and the bright white that we've left white to be the reflection of the sun. So you can just soften that off, and any hard lines that you think you don't like very much, you can soften them just by adding a little bit of water. Not much, because if you add too much water in, then you can end up making the paint sort of bleed a little bit, and it dries a bit funny. So try to avoid putting too much on, but just a little bit of water just to soften those edges and pull the paint around a little bit after you've put it down. Will just make your lake look a little bit more calm, a little bit more blended, which would be really nice. So as promised, I'm just going to type my email address into the comments. So you can contact me via my email with any questions. There's also a mailing list which you can sign up to. So you can sign up, there's a link to do that on the Facebook page, but you can email me if you'd like to be added on, and I can send you a link as well. So if you'd like to be kept up to date with Watercolour Club, the online stuff, but also when we go back to normal, whenever this ends. So you can sign up to the mailing list. I'm also planning to expand my mailing list a little bit more, to include a few more hints and tips, recommendations, things that I found interesting online, stuff like that. So if you want to be in on that, then do sign up to the mailing list. That'd be awesome. But yes, so the takeaways from that is that you can send your pictures into the Facebook page, or you can send them to my email address, and either is fine. Cool. And Matt says that it's a very relaxing way to spend a Sunday afternoon, and I'm glad, and I totally agree. It is. I think you can rewatch this as well as many times as you like, if you don't get bored of my voice. But yes, watercolour is so calming. It's very peaceful. You have to find a little bit of patience within yourself and peace with just allowing stuff to happen as it happens, because you don't always have a lot of control. So I'm going to go for it with the bank in the distance, and this bank is the one that we can make up all the kinds of stories we would like to about it. So I'm going to lift up that, adding some water into my black, because in the time that I haven't been using it, it had almost completely dried up, so it just goes to show how quickly it does dry on the palette, and you do need to add lots of water and keep doing that. I've got my black. I'm going to draw my horizon line across here. Oops, that didn't go so well, but I can do it again, so that's fine. Okay, I feel like that was a little bit, maybe too straight, so I'll just make it come down a bit from that side, so it's like there's a hill over there. Maybe. That'd be good. Now I've got to think of another story. So, lots of black. What do I want? I want another hill actually, right in the middle. And I'm going to put, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a monument on the top, and it's going to be because in this place, that monument on the lakeside there is the tallest point of that town. It's huge, look at that. Right, and then there's some trees down here. And so I'm imagining that people, maybe there are people stood up there watching the sun setting. We're watching the sun setting from this angle, but they're watching from there. That'd be quite cool. Remember, that's just reminded me of a place in Somerset we used to go, which had, I don't know if it was the tallest place in Somerset, but I used to like to think it was. But at the top of there was a really big monument, and it was really nice to go and watch either the sunrise or the sunset from up there. So drawing a few more trees on this bank. This seems to be mainly trees. Let me have a think. Okay, so we'll have a house over this side. And then some bushes. And then it's just more trees. I'm not feeling incredibly creative, so it's just going to be lots of trees and this nice sort of monument type thing. I'm actually going to draw a base onto the monument, so it's more like a, there we go, maybe like a circle on the top. There we go, that's cool. There. It's also slightly wonky. That's fine. Okay. Right, I'm adding more black on my palette. This is the bit where I'm going to make a very quick decision about where my bank is at the front of my drawing. I'm just going to draw 2 lines like that and then fill them in. I always quite like that the ripples that you draw underneath slightly come through, so it gives this texture to the bank, which is quite nice. And you can just smooth off that corner if you want to. Wash off. Oh, at least once in every live stream I lose my paintbrush. I think that's the first time I've done it this time, isn't it? I've genuinely just lost it. That's really weird. Okay. Different paintbrush it is. I don't know how I do it. Oh, haha. Look, it was right there. Oh dear. Just don't have eyes at the moment. So. I'm going to do the reeds on the front. And a couple of practice goes, so I got nervous then. There we go. Nice and relaxed. And then in we go. Cool. This time I'm going to add some, I guess they're seeds that are on the ends of these reeds, like here, just to make them look like riverside plants. I think that makes them look quite nice. Just for some of them, just add a little bit of variety in there. And I'm going to do my little bird again. And hopefully this time it will. Maybe I'll test myself and I'll draw him facing the other direction. See if I can do it. Okay, we ready? So little dot for the head, and body is going to be on this side this time. And then what we do is connect that side to that side, and then we draw his little tail, and we draw his little feet going down. It's a tiny bird, and his little beak. Okay, yeah, okay. I think I got away with that one. It's not my best bird ever, but he's fine. And I'm going to do my boat this time. Is going to be over here. Then a line up for the sail. And then some lines just to make it be part of the painting. And again, my little birds, but this time I'm going to put them quite high up on this side. They're a little bit heavy-handed birds, so maybe they're birds of prey or something like that are slightly bigger. So yes, if you make a mistake like that, or you do a line too thick, I always just make a story about it, especially with things like this where it's just from my head. It's just something that I'm not actually following a picture. But I think even if you are following a picture exactly, then you're allowed to make little adjustments to the painting. So if you do make a line thicker than it should be, then maybe just go with it. Maybe just say, well, it's because it's a painting and not a photograph of the thing that you wanted to capture. So I think all of those things are very, very fine. And a lot of people think they're not very good at art because it doesn't look like a photograph at the end of the day, but I never think they should look like photographs, otherwise there's not really much point. So there we go. So that is painting number 2, and painting number 1 is there beside it. So as soon as that is dry, I'll be taking that masking tape off in the way that I showed you earlier, and I will be signing it probably somewhere at the bottom there. So I hope you all got on okay. And I wonder if anybody has any final comments to make, because it is almost time for me to sign off. So if you're here and you haven't said anything yet and you'd like to, just send a little message, say hi, and I'll say hi back. So thank you everybody for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure to paint with you, and I'm so excited to see to look and see what everybody's been up to. So please don't forget to send in your paintings and pictures of you working along at home. You can also, once this is over, you can replay this and you can go back through the steps. So if you felt like you wanted to spend a bit more time on one of the sections, then you can do that. And if you do, let me know as well, because then you can send me a picture of your go that you have in a couple of days' time, and that'd be really nice. It just keeps me seeing art every day, which is really nice, and something I miss because I usually work at a school as an art technician and see art every day. So yeah, so it's quite nice to see everybody's work coming in from home. So the other thing is that this session today is free. It's free for everybody that wants to join in. Usually when I run Watercolour Club, it's £5 per person, and that helps me to cover the cost of the materials and things like that, and just pays me a little bit for my time in organising it. But today, because of the situation, I've set this up for free. But I am accepting donations, and the way that I'm doing it, because I don't I always feel like I don't want to ask for money for nothing. So the way I'm doing it is I'm actually in the process of designing some thank you postcards, which will be maybe something like this. I've had a few goes. I wanted to actually be able to show you some today, but they didn't go so well. So I'm working on them. And the idea is that if anybody is able to donate £5 or more towards Watercolour Club and my practice during this time, then you will receive a thank you postcard from me. So I think the situation for a lot of creative people right now is that a lot of income has been indefinitely cancelled, and it's quite tricky to work with that. And I think a lot of people are offering their time online for free. So I've set up this system, but if you feel like you would like to donate, I would be absolutely over the moon about that. But if you can't, and if you're not in a position to be able to, because I do understand that is the situation for quite a lot of people, then please don't feel guilty. This is my gift to you, because you just tuning in and being part of it is really helpful to me too. So Yenna says, I'm trying to do something a bit different for my second one. It might end up with a total failure, but it's a surprise. Oh, excellent. Okay, well, hopefully it doesn't turn out a failure. And Leslie says, thank you so much. Hope your cats are behaving today. Yes. Well, earlier on in the feed, they were really distracting me because they were clawing at the door and they were meowing. And I don't know, you might have been able to hear it. They were meowing so loudly, I could hear it through my headphones. So I think they're quite disappointed that they've been shut out of the studio. They've been a little bit restless because we've been home all the time, and they're a bit confused about why that is. So they're lovely as always, but yes, little terrors. But this last time I got them in and showed off my cats to the camera, so maybe I will go and grab them in a moment if they are outside the door. And Yenna says thank you so much from both of us, and so does Andrew. Andrew says really enjoyed this, thank you so much. So thank you very much for joining in. Well, okay, I'll see if the cats are outside the door, and if they are, I'll bring them back and I'll say bye from all of us. Trying to navigate the tripod and everything. Hello. I could only find one. The other one has disappeared. But this is Finley, my massive lion of a cat. I think he is the one who was doing all of the meowing earlier on. But he's tired himself out from all that. I'll let him go now. Maybe the other one will show up in a second, but I think he's busy downstairs. But thank you everybody so much for tuning in and for being part of my Sunday afternoon. I will be releasing the next date for the next Watercolour Club, and I'll be sharing that with you on the Facebook page. Again, if you'd like to sign up to the mailing list, then you can do that as well, and you will get the news as well that way, and some links and some reminders. So do feel free to sign up for the mailing list. With that, I use a MailChimp system, so it means that you can unsubscribe at any time if you find that after this is all over it's not for you or something like that. That's perfectly fine, and it's also very secure, so your email address and your details won't be shared with anybody else. So that's if you'd like to join the mailing list. If you'd like to donate towards Watercolour Club, there is a link in the video description which should take you to my website, and it takes you to a page on my website where you can read through all of what I said about the thank you postcards, and why I'm offering that. What I'll do is I'll just type my website address there. So you can also, if you want to visit my website and read more about what I do as an artist, then please do feel free, and let me know what you think as well. But other than that, unless anybody has any extra questions they want to add real quickly, I think that we've come to a nice stopping point. In fact, perhaps we can end with me taking the masking tape off of here, because that's quite satisfying. I'll just pull this off because it's ready to go. Yeah. Finley's just perked up waiting for the little ball of masking tape, which he loves to play with. There we go. Sign it with my little pen. It's the 19th today. My name is E. Break. Well, that's how I sign things anyway. And there we go. Well, thank you everybody, and I hope to see you next time. And in the meantime, I really look forward to all of your messages and emails, and seeing all of your artwork. And if you've really enjoyed today, please do write me a little review on my Facebook page just to say how you found it. And if you feel like you know somebody that would really enjoy tuning into the next episode of Watercolour Club, then please do send them a link to the next event, and help to spread the word. The more of us here at the same time, I feel like the bigger community we're going to grow, and the more calm we spread across the world for that little bit, that 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon. So thank you again, and